Good morning. Back home here in Australia, and just wanted to have a chat with you about some of my thoughts on the bushfire crisis that we've been having in this country, and how to prevent it, and all the effects of climate change, where 2019 was the hottest year in recorded history in Australia, and it was also the driest, which has been a terrible combination. Luckily, the last few days we've had a tiny bit of rain, so things are looking a little bit greener around here. But yeah, it's a very important issue going forward, because if it keeps getting hotter, Australia is going to be virtually unlivable. So yeah, I wanted to discuss some of the ways that we can solve the problem of climate change, and also make Australia a better place to live. So one of the biggest problems I think in Australia is the deforestation of the country, especially on the east coast. So many forests have been chopped down, mostly for grazing land, so to graze cattle and sheep and that sort of thing. And that's why adopting a plant-based diet is the real solution for Australia. We've got to get away from cattle farming, we've got to get away from all the sheep farming, and we've got to replant our forests. So there's been a lot of studies showing that if we, as a planet, replant 1 billion trees, or several billion trees, I should say, maybe it's 1 trillion, then we can reverse the effects of climate change. So that's sort of what I've been doing on my property. We bought 17 acres north of the Sunshine Coast in Australia, and it was subdivided into having 8 blocks of land, but we've been replanting it. So you can see around here, we've got all sorts of fruit and nut trees, as well as native trees, fruit trees going in. So this is after 4 years. And we've got a lot of native wildlife coming back. But trees moderate the climate, basically, and they bring in rain. So that's what Australia needs, is one of the most important things. It's one of the reasons why we have our whole food nutrition class, online class, and a vegan nutrition class, because we think it's one of the most important things we can do for the future. Obviously, there's other things like stopping of coal mining and adopting solar power, wind power, that kind of thing. That's very important, and getting away from our dependence on oil. So getting more into electric cars that are powered by solar power or wind power, or more sustainable forms of energy. So we're not also supplying too much money to a lot of autocratic regimes in the Middle East and other countries where they're torturing their people, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's my important message to you, is that's one major aspect. And I really think a lot of people could be rebuying land like we did here. For 17 acres with a small house on it, we paid $266,000 about 4 years ago. So in places like Sydney or Melbourne, you couldn't even get a studio apartment for that. So, let alone, most people's houses are worth $1 million down there. They could buy up large tracts of land and replant it. And one of the ways we do that is with trying to use permaculture. So we're starting off with planting what they call pioneer trees, which are things like acacias. So this is a Queensland acacia here. And they grow very quickly, and they can then provide shade for other plants, which are more your fruit and nut trees and things like that, which then also give you organic food. There's no better form of nutrition than getting food straight from your garden, and it tastes better, way better, and the nutrients content is way higher. So it's a win-win situation, actually. That's what I recommend for people all over the world, not just Australia, is to buy up land that's being used for things like cattle farming. Because we can see even the fires in the Amazon, they're all caused by cattle farmers. It's people they're obviously supplying meat to South America and North America. So if people stopped eating meat and got more into plant-based diets, plant-based proteins and things like that, then we wouldn't have any need to destroy such beautiful forests. And they are what's keeping this planet inhabitable. All the forests around the world is keeping the climate way cooler, and as well as providing, of course, enormous living space for many, many species of life. They say that in these fires in Australia, that there's quite possibly a lot of species have gone extinct recently. So that's obviously a terrible thing, as well as 1 billion native wildlife killed. So 1 billion native animals died in those fires. That's an enormous number. That's kangaroos, wallabies, koalas. The koalas are virtually going on the extinct list, not extinct, but endangered list now, which, I mean, at least that'll be a good thing. But one thing, since we've come here, we cleared out a lot of the invasive species. So there's a lot of what we call lantana and spiky kinds of plants that were here, that were invaded, came from other countries and made it that wildlife didn't want to come here. So we cleared all that out by hand, thanks to some of my family members and myself. And now we've seen koalas on our property again. We saw a mother and baby just the other day, and we've seen quite a few males. So we're making land inhabitable for wildlife, as well as producing food. We do have to do things like cage our trees because of the wallabies, but that's a minor expense in order to live with wildlife. So that's an important thing. Other aspects of permaculture when you're first starting are things like swales, which are small trenches. They can actually be quite big. We haven't done them quite as big as what we normally do, but when you have land that is on an angle slanted, you want to catch the water. And so you can see here we've got some trenches to catch water. And all over the place we do that so that it doesn't just run down and off the land taking the nutrients. So digging swales, and then obviously figuring out what's going to grow on your land is very important. But I recommend, growing trees that can provide food. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. You're helping the environment while providing food. But also a lot of native trees for wherever you are, and flowering trees, because they're going to bring in the pollinators. And you can hear in the background the birds that have come back to our property. So we've got a constant supply, not a supply, but a constant amount of birds coming through here. And it makes it nice. It's nice for humans to live with other animals. I think we learn a lot from them.